Okay, so hello everyone. Myself Nibedita. I'm a 17-year-old girl. I am doing my BSc Physics right now, and I identify myself as an ardent astrophile. I don't know how far I'll be able to go far in my life, but I just know that I'll always be passionate enough. And then comes the question that why am I here today? So behind this, I think there's a very small story. So, I'm from a middle class family. So, till today, we don't have an inverter at home. So, it all started when I think whenever there used to be a power cut, me and my father used to go to the terrace and used to go and we used to stargaze, of course. Like at nights, we used to stargaze. So, I think it was in fifth standard when again, one fair day, the power went off and my dad told that come let's go up, and then we went to the terrace and my dad told me to start counting the stars. No, I started counting the stars, and then my dad told me one thing. He told me that you know what, you can never complete counting them. The more you count, the more there will be. And then I noticed, yes, he was right. The more I counted, there were more and more number of stars. So that was first thing. And second thing was that he told me that do you know the star that you're counting right now that might be there or might not even be there? And I'm like, that's ridiculous, right? I'm looking at the star. And then he said, what you're looking at is just the light coming from the star. The star might have died 8 million years ago, and today you're able to see the light of that star. And that, I think, ignited that spark towards physics. I didn't know the name physics back then. Back then in fifth standard, I wanted to be a space scientist. And then I came on at, I think at ninth standard, I got introduced to physics, and that's how I knew. And then I came to know about something named astrophysics, which was what I actually wanted to do in life. So, yes, that is why I'm here, because I think my father is the biggest inspiration. My father taught me always that whenever there's a problem, always, instead of looking down at your feet, look above, because there's so much that you don't know and there's so much yet to get discovered. So, yeah, that's who I am, and that's why I'm here. So the topic as given was the chaotic wonders of physics and the chaos of the human mind. All right, so I want to tell one thing very clearly, that you see, physics is not the only subject in science, right? There is something known as chemistry, there's something known as biology. Then why have I chosen physics especially, and why do I love physics alone so much? So the answer to that is that you see, what is chemistry? Chemistry is basically the study of atoms and molecules coming together and then reactions, etc., etc. But the basis of chemistry, as I said, is atom, is itself made out of fundamental physics forces like electrostatic forces, nuclear forces. There are different types of nuclear forces, etc. So the basic building block of everything and anything around us, an atom, is itself governed by the laws of physics. And that is exactly why I think this presentation is about physics, and I am trying to decode the art of life from the art of physics. So, I've been start. So, I believe before anything, it is we should first curate, yeah, because unless and until we curate, there's not going to be any interest. Like I guess a lot of people are not from physics background, so to get enough interest, I think it's enough. It's extremely necessary to curate, and I've written a quote here: the curiosity is the mother of necessity, and necessity is the mother of invention. So I want you all to put your mics unmute and let me ask you a question.
Curiosity থাকতে লাগবে curiosity না থাকলে
Yeah, so let me ask you a question, that how do we see anything? How do we see? Yeah, I want any one of you to answer. How do we see anything?
The light gets reflected from the object which we are seeing, and our eyes
Exactly, exactly.
kind of sends this signal to the brain, and the brain interprets it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yes, that is what happens. Light falls on an object, it gets reflected back, and that's how we see it. But what really is light? So what really is light? It took us very long time to understand. So here there is a timeline. Yes. So here is the timeline of light ideas and technology, what it took to understand what light is. So I don't think there's any need to go very detailed into this, but let me tell you something. The first person who came, he was Plato. He came and told that light originated from our eyes. He told that light is inside your eyes. That's what he told. And that's how the first inventions of light were. And then gradually people proved other people wrong, and he also was proved wrong within a very few very few centuries. I guess he was proved wrong. So it all started from Plato, and then one day Newton came and told something about the corpuscular theory of light. So what he told was that light entirely is made out of small particles known as corpuscles. And then he also devised certain equations for light, which today are known as Newtonian equations of light. But then what happened was that a lot of scientists came forward and they proved Newton wrong. For example, the double slit experiment was conducted by Mr. Young. So Mr. Young, what he did was that he did not do it with photons at the first. He actually did it with electrons. So you see this image out here. What he did was that he kept a photon ejector. An electron ejector. And then he shot out electrons. And what happened was that when these electrons passed through two slits, they actually formed an interference fringe, which was not supposed to happen, right? This should not have happened if electrons were just a particle. What should have happened if electrons were just a particle? You would just see two bands of electron dots, right? But that was not what happened when Young did it. What he found out was that the electron actually, while coming from here to here, the electron is behaving as a particle. And then when it reaches near the slits, the electron starts behaving like a wave. And this is basically what, again, Young did. He took a light source and he passed it through two small slits, and then he noticed an interference pattern. Young first did it with an electron, and then he did it with a light source, and thus came the new thing the new concept of the wave-particle duality. What Young concluded that every nanoparticle actually is both a wave and both a particle. Now, in case of an electron, this wave-particle duality holds firm. No one is going to misprove that ever. But then Maxwell came and he found out what an electromagnetic wave was. Not really, even Planck had some contributions, but Maxwell devised the equations. He found out all the equations related to EMW. And then Planck found out that the speed of light is exactly equal to the speed of an electromagnetic wave. And thus, they concluded that, Maxwell and Planck together concluded that light is now a wave, which was again extremely shocking because we started with Newton, who said light is a particle. And then now we are at a point where we are telling that light is a wave. And then exactly after 2 centuries, there came Mr. Einstein. What he did was he performed the photoelectric effect. Photoelectric effect is basically where he projected some photons on a metal surface, and then electrons started to come out of them. That is possible only if light is composed only out of photons, right? So I think that again was controversial of what Maxwell found. And then came Mr. Young, who told that no, this is the consequence of wave-particle duality. But let me tell you something. To have a wave-particle duality, there should be a very basic particle. You see, electron shows wave-particle duality, perfect. But light being an electromagnetic wave, what is an electromagnetic wave? It's basically a wave where electric fields and magnetic fields come together, merge, travel perpendicular. So till date, the point I'm trying to make is, till date, we don't know what light is. And And it shall take us Einstein after Einstein, Newton after Newton to tell us what light really is. And that is exactly the amount of anonymity in the world. I think this small example is enough to tell us that how much unaware we are of what is around us. It's a very basic thing, right? You're looking at everything, you're observing everything because of light. But till today, like after so many years of scientific evolution, scientific researchers, so huge scientific communities, we still don't know the basic of one simple thing, which is known as light. So that is exactly the complexity of the physics. And then here is a small fund of what we'll do today. So first is the vastness of endlessness. This is basically for enrichment and curiosity. Then how I'm going to connect science with art. And then comes our place in the universe. Then decoding the art of life from the art of physics. And then last point, curiosity is the master of all deeds. So yeah, let's start then. If you just look up at the sky, there is so much that we don't know, and it's so vast. You can't never grasp everything which is there at one glance. It's so vast. So of course there are a lot of things that we don't know, and here are some small examples of stuff that we think we know, but we don't know anything. And here are small examples for that. First one is the oh my god particle. So we've all heard about the god particle, right? Higgs boson. He also got the Pulitzer Award for this. And then till 1991, everything was perfect. Before Higgs got discovered, everything was perfect. Life was perfect. But then one day, October 15, 1991, a very strange particle came inside Earth's atmosphere, and that was named as the oh my god particle for a reason. It's written here that humanity was visited by one of the most baffling entity from outer space, and that changed the views of particle physics forever. The particle was monoatomic. The particle was monoatomic, yet it was traveling at a speed which is similar to 99.999999999999999999999999999999999999999% of the speed of light. Now that is the most intriguing information about this thing, because till date, the only thing that has the speed of light is light itself on its own, or else it's something which you are accelerating to the speed of light. So if it's not a photon, it has to be something else which is defying logic. And most importantly, it was a monoatomic nucleus. It had only one atom carrying such huge kinetic energy. And till date, no one figured out from where it came. It never came again. And this changed particle physics forever. Next comes states of matter. So you see, we've always had this question. Every scientific discovery in this world started with one simple question asked by one man, that what is it that I see around me? What is everything? So when the early physicists started to question the universe around them, they had this hunger of knowing what matter was. So basically, you have a pen near you, you lift up that pen. What is this pen made of? What is this? This is what today we know, but at that time they did. So the early physicists, they started having this extreme curiosity and hunger to know what things around them are. And that is how I think they started to search for what is matter. So Greek philosopher Aristotle, we have come across him I think a lot of places. This guy has done huge work. So he came and he told that, he claims that everything in this world is made out of 5 things, 5 basic elements. Those are earth, fire, ether, space, and water. This is what Aristotle told. And soon, as we know, this defied common logic. People started asking, if this is the case, then what is earth made of? What are ions? What are atoms? What are not atoms? What are ions? What are charged particles? From where is charge curated? So thus Aristotle was proved wrong. And then we had a lot of people who came forward, and then we found out that there are 3 states of matter. which are solid, liquid, and gas. Now, solid, liquid, and gas was perfectly fine. It perfectly fit with our idea of the preconceived universe that we had. It was all perfect. Till one day, Bose and Einstein come together and they tell that, okay, now what if I take some ions and supercool them to a form that they're condensed? We all know what an ion is, right? From an atom, you are either removing an electron or you're adding an electron. That is what makes up an ion. It's a charged atom, something of that species. So then Bose and Einstein came together and they told that what if we supercool this ion? What will happen? It will neither be a solid, it will neither be a gas, it will neither be liquid because it's not made of atoms, it's made of ions. That's when they came and then they had a breakthrough. They came up with something known as the BEC or the Bose-Einstein condensate, supercooled ions. And this again, everything was perfect. Then one day one scientist came and told that, okay, if you take ions, if you supercool them, condense them, you form BEC. But what if I superheat them? Extreme heat and extreme temperature that the ions are boiling, they're something of that state, then what is it then? It's again neither solid, neither liquid, neither gas because they are not made of atoms, they are made of ions. And they are not BEC again because it's not condensed, it's extremely hot. Then what is it? That's again where people came up with the term plasma. And the most shocking thing was that they later found out that plasma is 97% of whatever we see around us. Because whatever we have seen, we have all just seen solid, liquid, gas, everything. But knowing the fact that 97% of the matter around the universe is actually in plasma state, that baffles physicists till date. And till date, plasma technology is one of the most highly succeeding, highly flourishing departments of physics. So again, life was perfect till one person came and told that we found something new, which is known as the time crystal. Now, what is a time crystal? This is an image of a time crystal. Now, basically what happens, everything, solid, liquid, gas, Bose-Einstein condensate, plasma, everything, they repeat themselves in space. Now, what do I mean by this term, repeat themselves in space? They have definite dimensions, okay? So basically, if you're plotting the axis of a dimension, the width is X and the breadth is Y. So that is what I mean when I say it repeats itself in space. But time crystal was different. It repeated itself in time. Now, what does that mean? The time crystal, if you leave it outside, it actually constantly keeps vibrating without an external force. I repeat again, the time crystal constantly keeps changing. Its position constantly keeps vibrating in time and without any external force. It's something similar to saying like you're taking your pencil, you're taking it to the outer space and you're taking it to a place where there is no external influence of any other force, but still the pencil is continuously vibrating. That will really be shocking, right? That is exactly the case with time crystal. So we have another new state of matter now, which is time crystal, which is neither a solid, neither liquid, neither gas, neither Bose-Einstein condensate, neither plasma. And even after finding all of this, then we came up with something named as dark matter, didn't we? Like how are matter combining with each other? How did matter start combining at the Planck state? Everything is linking back to one thing, that there is something which we don't know, and that something which we don't know is named as dark matter by physicists. And then after all of this, all of such huge stories, we come to know one very shocking news, that out of the universe, everything 100%, 97% is dark matter and 3% is matter. So basically everything that we were fighting for was only 3% of what we found out. The entire matter, there's only going to be 3% of which we know, and 97% dark matter, which no one has no clue. So how many states of matter do we have till date? No one knows, because we don't know What is matter? We still don't know, and we still don't know what inventions and what discoveries are coming on our way to find out what things are. So next, okay, so let me ask again a question to someone. I'll again ask you all to unmute yourself if anyone knows the answer. Can anyone define what is time? Can anyone define time? Anyone? I guess.
Um, is it? I don't know. Is it a linear movement?
Who is this?
I
Who
mean,
told? Oh, okay. Time is a linear movement.
that's the best I could think of.
Okay. Shrikantana,
time,
please. Yeah, Shrikantana, please don't answer. I know you know the answer.
I recently heard somewhere that time is related to gravity, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Time is definitely related to gravity. Of course. That's the relativity, right?
Uh-huh.
That's what Einstein came and told
Mhm.
us. So yes, so we have no one else. Does anyone know what time is?
In engineering, time is normally treated as a constant because we take dy by dt. So
Yeah.
it is only time is constant because otherwise you cannot. If your time changes, we have difficulty in
Yeah.
solving many of our equations.
Okay, yes. So what is time? So time is nothing but a coordinate in the graph of space-time. What is graph of space-time? Everything around us is actually a graph. This is what the graph looks like basically. This is what the graph looks like. And here there are x and y coordinates. The x coordinates are time. So what is time? Time is just a coordinate in the fabric of space-time. So what Einstein came and told that gravity is not just a force. You remember what Newton told, right? Newton was sitting under an apple tree, apple fell, and then Newton asked a question that why did the apple fall downwards? And that's how Newton gave us the famous formula: force is equals to g into mass divided by r square. This is what Newton came and told us. But soon Einstein came and told us that no, that is not what gravity is. Gravity is actually the curvature of space-time. So what is this? Whenever there is a heavy mass in that fabric of space-time, it is creating a curvature. Do you see that? It's creating a curvature, and this curvature is actually causing this bends out here because of what? Everything is revolving around. So basically the moon is revolving around the earth because of not revolving, rotating. The moon is rotating around the earth because of this curvature. So this is what is time and this is what is space-time. So this is exactly how gravity works. Newtonian mechanics very recently, I think 1 year back, Newtonian mechanics was proved wrong. Newton was proved wrong. Newton was told that your theory holds true only for very small objects. And thus Einstein was proved right that gravity is nothing but actually curvature of the space-time graph. So any common galaxy or any object in the universe, it functions similarly. So what happens in case of a galaxy is that in this center position, there will be a black hole. A black hole is something which exerts extreme amount of gravitational pull, and we all know that. So that is what a black hole does, and thus stellar objects start revolving around them. That is what exactly a galaxy is. A galaxy is what? A group of stars who are rotating. Not only the stars, group of stars, space debris, a group of extraterrestrial objects which are revolving around a center, revolving around a center. The center is most commonly a black hole because black hole has extremely high gravitational pull. So that is basically what a common galaxy is. So that is why most of the galaxies are either skeptical, they are either spherical, not spherical, I think, elliptical. I'm sorry. Yes, most of the galaxies are elliptical, or most of the galaxies are circular in nature. Milky Way is elliptical, partially. Andromeda is circular. Andromeda is a nearest galaxy to us. But then there came a person named Arthur Hoax. What did Arthur Hoax do? Arthur Hoax was once sitting inside his lab, and then he found out a galaxy with this shape. Now, this again was more than enough to baffle physicists, because you see the center is here, and here you see there is going to be certain amount of galaxies or a certain amount of celestial objects which are rotating the center, and then there is a gap here. Do you notice this gap? Yeah. So there is a gap here, and then suddenly after this gap, there is again extraterrestrial objects here. Now this again changed physics forever, because you see force is equals to g mm by r square. So the force which is present here is going to be higher than the force which is present here, right? The force here is higher than the force here. Then why are there extraterrestrial objects here, and then why are there no extraterrestrial objects here? Why is this a space? And now a lot of you might tell that that might be an asteroid belt that you don't know, maybe it's not visible. But no, a lot of experiments were conducted, ultraviolet experiments were conducted to find out that this place is actually free space. So you see, this image itself is extremely intriguing, right? Like, how can there be a galaxy such as this? How can there be a galaxy? So basically, Hawke told this, that it's actually a galaxy inside another galaxy. This is what Hawke came and told. Now, not Hawke came and told. Now, I don't know if you're curated enough. I want you all to go out there and find what is Burchard's galaxy, and I think you will get even more intrigued. Burchard's galaxy is one more step further. I won't be telling what Burchard's galaxy is right now, because that would be too much facts and information. But Burchard's galaxy is something which is extremely intriguing. It is even more intriguing than what an Hawke's object is. So yeah, go and find out, I think. Yeah, so next is atom is nothing but a faux pas. We still don't know what an atom is. That is the level of anonymity. Electron, what is electron? Electron orbitals and everything, they are nothing but just small. It's nothing but a game of probability. Electron density, this is the chart of electron density, and that is how electron densities, that is how orbitals are done. Everything is revolving around perception, and everything is revolving around a quantity known as probability. This is the thing. This is what physics is teaching us, right? Like, we don't know what things are. We can never know. We have so many years and decades and centuries of scientific evolution, scientific communities, and yet we don't know. We don't even know what an atom is. We don't know what light is. Everything, like scientists, they live in the border of the known and the unknown, as said by Neil deGrasse Tyson, that we don't know anything. And so let's all be humble, right? Like, seriously, what do we know? We don't even know what light is. So this is the extreme amount of anonymity in the universe. And then comes this uncertainty is the new certainty. The only thing in the life, the only thing in physics, the only thing in science which is certain is uncertainty, because there is nothing that we know. So we must all have heard about Mr. Erwin Schrödinger, the Schrödinger's cat experiment. So what Schrödinger did was, he took a box and he kept a cat inside the box, and he kept a small bottle of poison along with the cat. Now, there was 50% probability that the poison might leak and the cat may die. And there was 50% probability that the poison might not leak and the cat may not die. So basically, when you go there, he kept the box closed and he left it. So basically, he knew that if he went to the box and opened the box, there was 50% probability that either the cat could have been alive or either the cat could have been dead. So he just left and he came and sat at his desk. And then Schrödinger thought of something like, okay, if I go and open the box, I'll definitely be able to know what is the state of the cat. Like, is it dead or is it alive? But is it possible for me? I will not move from my desk. I'll just sit here. But from here, I want to know whether the cat is dead or alive. Will I ever be able to know that? What is the state of the cat at this instant of time? And then he noticed ridiculously that the cat at that particular instant of time is both dead and alive. That basically means that I'm sitting in front of you. Unless and until you look at me, I am 50% dead and 50% alive. And that is exactly what this image shows us. The cat is 50% dead and 50% alive. And thus, this opened up something known as quantum physics, and something which baffles physicists till date. It basically tells us that anything and everything in this universe, of course, microscopic objects, anything and everything around us does not exist 50% of the times until and unless you look at it. So basically now, the thing is that a lot of argument is put forward that all of these are just microscopic. They're quantum physics. But let me ask you a question. The chair that you're sitting on right now, it has atoms, right? It has electrons. So basically, if the reason why the electrons and nucleus is there is the reason why atoms are there. The atoms are there is the reason why the chair is there. Now, if I told you that unless and until you actually use an electron microscope and look at the atom, you don't know whether the atom is really there or not. And if the atom is 50% of the time not there, then what are you sitting at? So this is what is the complexity. This is what is the anonymity. Unless and until you're looking at an object, you don't know what it is, right? So this is, thus, Schrodinger came up with something known as a Schrodinger wave equation. He basically told that everything in life is nothing but a series of maximum probabilities. If there is an object around you, it is there because there was 50% probability that it is there, and there is 50% probability that it is alive. That's it. That is life. That is basically life. Everything is uncertain until and unless you look at it. The observable universe, I think, is very, very small than what the unobservable universe is, and that is what I think should intrigue every one of us. Then I'll come back to this point later. Hamlet is never wrong. I'll come back to it. Yes. So here comes something known as the science is art and scientists are artists. Now, why do I say this, that science is art? Because truly, just look around you. Everything in this universe is perfect. Everything in this universe is perfect. Even if one physical basic quantity which we knew changed itself with a 0.0000001%, the effects would be catastrophic. And let me tell that the spin of an electron has to be 2.457. And if that is not the case, the effect will be catastrophic. If Earth is revolving at a rate of 8,000 miles per hour, if it stops for 1 second, we all will be thrown apart in space. Everything in this universe is perfectly manufactured. Everything in this universe is perfect. And one very big example of that is a golden ratio. We all know what the golden ratio is. You see, everything is golden ratio. A cat is sleeping, there is golden ratio in this. A flower petal, there is golden ratio in this. And it's a seashell. There is again golden ratio in this. So can you imagine that the entire world is nothing but a person who sat with a piece of paper and he started writing down everything. He formulated certain kind of equations and then he came out with a result. It's exactly that which intriguing. Like literally, if the Earth's radius is 6,450 kilometers, then that is precise. If Earth's radius was even 1% more or 1% less, then I'm sorry to say this, but this solar system would have ceased to exist. That is the precision. That is the amount of precision. Not only that, I think I have a meme here. Wait, hold on. Not just that. Yes, everywhere. golden ratio is everywhere. All right. Okay, so now here comes one part. We are not that important. Why? Because there are millions to the power millions to the power millions to the power millions of us. And for this, I would like to show a I would like to show a video to all of you. Yeah, so I want you all to look at this video.
Yeah. Let's start.
Yep.
See how this where we are, our position. She's trying to show what is a person. Sound is not coming. Nice. 10 micrometers. 100 micrometers. Okay. You see what is the atom or something she said, no picometer, nucleus. The sound is coming. The sound was coming. Okay, start.
All right. So yes. So I think the video itself is self-explanatory, that what is our position, where we are, and what is our importance. So here is something that sitting inside a nutshell, we claim to be the masters of this infinite space, as said by Hamlet. So today, having this vast insight of knowledge on how the universe actually works, we all forget a huge something commonly known as the eyewitness testimony. Now, what is the eyewitness testimony? The human mind is actually a warehouse of errors. We have this certain inability to cope up with probability and statistical data. Like, for example, on an average, every 2.3 times you are actually taking a reading, we are wrong. This is certainly something that has not been bothering us so much, right? Like literally run your naked eyes through the naked universe right in front of you. You will notice an endless vacuum of space Something so huge your eyes are simply incapable of capturing. You'll toss your head around just to escape what you're seeing is so vast and is yet so infinitesimally small. Now, you are all going to have a brain freeze. I'm giving you an alert, brain freeze alert. We don't know 80% of the origin of the matter that we feel today. We don't know the source of 70% of the gravity. We don't know the reason for 60% of the energies that surround us. We don't know who we are. What we know is just 0.0000001% of what things are. So next time we claim ourselves to be the masters and we claim our problems to be big, let's all keep this one thing in mind, that what is going to happen to the universe if you are not here. So remember Cassini? Cassini was a space probe sent by NASA to Saturn. Cassini actually sent a very beautiful image where Cassini showed Earth to be one little spot. And what is the distance between Saturn and Earth? It is really, really small when it comes to the vastness of the universe, right? We just saw the video. What is going to be the distance between Saturn and Earth? So within just that much of distance, Earth is this small. So a person who has knowledge of the logarithmic scale of the universe knows that how small is the distance between the Saturn and Earth, and then imagine the thought that we are just a speck of dirt in this vast, endless enigma of vacuum that is above your head. Okay, so now let's all do a thought experiment. You make 1,000 people stand in a line and tell all of them to toss a coin, okay? And tell all the people arriving at tails to leave. So what happens? Initially 500 people get heads, 500 people get tails. So the number statistically keeps dropping, yeah? So first it becomes 50% every time. So you're left with 500, then you're left with, gradually at a point you're left with 100, then so the number keeps statistically dropping in our experiment. And then at a point it comes to 50, and then gradually at a point you're left with 1. That one person who tossed the coin and ended up with 10 heads in a row, we as humans are ironically treating that one person as the master of the space that we see. You are just one speck of dirt in this universe. And by you, I mean the entire human population. We are all just one speck of dirt, okay? We are one amongst gazillion to the power gazillion to the power gazillion to the power gazillion dust specks floating around in this endless space. So next time, let's all stop taking our stuff so seriously. Let's all stop taking our problems seriously, because seriously, whatever we are today, it's a gift, it's an opportunity, and our problems are not going to make the universe stop, is it? No, it's not going to make the universe stop. The universe does not care. Simply it is as that. But still, in spite of being just a speck of dirt, this 300-pound brain that we have, this is till date the most complex thing in the universe. So we are not just lucky to be here, we are rare to be here. And these are some very beautiful quotes said by a lot of people. You see the Marie Curie one, nothing in life is to be feared, it is only to be understood. And then there are then there's one by Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's telling the exact same thing as I told, that we are just one among very, 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 very large crowd. So let's stop treating ourselves as the masters. We don't know anything still, right? Here is again Neil deGrasse Tyson telling that once upon a time, people identified the god Neptune as a source of storms at the sea. Today we call these storms hurricanes. And the only people who still call hurricanes acts of gods are the people who write insurance forms. This is where we are today. So the thing is that, also I'd like to tell about Thomas Alva Edison. We all know what Thomas Alva Edisons are. And if there are any Tesla fans, please don't get offended. I'm not speaking anything against Tesla, but let's see about Edison. So what did Edison do? He found out the electric bulb, right? But did he find it out at the first attempt? No. He had 99 failed attempts. 99 times he went wrong, and the 100th time he found out the electric bulb. And in one interview, when an interviewer asked when an interviewer asked Edison, I'm sorry for saying Einstein, Edison, that what is it? You failed 99 times. Are you kidding me? And you're telling me that you're the greatest inventor who's found out the electric bulb? You've just failed. You failed so many times. And as a reply to that, I'm saying Einstein. See, and as a reply to that, Edison told that I did not fail 99 times. I found out 99 ways on how not to build a bulb. And I think that is what it is. Like, seriously, failures are just telling us what not to do, and not that is the end. So yes, this is the fag end of the entire presentation, that be curious. Be curious, because there is nothing that we know. We have not even reached half a meter of the scape which is around us. We don't know anything. And according to the anthropic principles by Stephen Hawking, there were a million of possibilities that Earth could not have been born. If Earth is born today, if we are all as a human species here today, then that is because of 1 by millionth of a possibility. So let us all enjoy this life. Let us all enjoy this 1 divided by a million probability, right? We are all here. There was a million possibilities. You could have ended up somewhere else. There was a million possibilities you could not have created. There was a million of there's a million of possibilities. Human beings could not have had brains, etc., etc., and etc. So that is what exactly the anthropic principle says by Stephen Hawking. So I think let us all be curious, and let us all remember one thing, that no matter how far things go, we are always going to have this extreme hunger for knowledge, because till today I again say that there's nothing that we know, and it will again take us years after years, after centuries to know who we are. So let us never look down at our feet when we have a problem. Let us all look up at the sky, be curious, try to find out, try to venture, try to explore. There is never going to be 100% enlightenment. There is never going to be a person who's going to come and tell that I know 100% of what the universe is. But let us all at least strive towards it, right? All right, so that's it. Thank you.